Hello, everyone. We're about to get started in just a moment. We might have some stragglers come in as we get going. But hello, everyone. Welcome. On behalf of Library Makers, I would like to welcome you to join the discussion and continuing the conversation about equity in library makerspaces. We're very excited to have Kara and Sarah here with us again to continue this conversation. Um, my name is Marnie Balint. I'm the experiential learning supervisor at Skokie Public Library. I'm going to be your ambassador for Library Makers here today. Library Makers is a community that connects and supports library staff from all over the country in libraries, big and small, who are all at different points in their maker journey. Whether you're just getting started or you've been making for many years, we welcome you to our online community. LibraryMakers.org has its own social platform where you can connect and get to know one another, share questions, ideas, and resources, enjoy blog posts on relevant topics, and peruse a video library of past events. Please note that today's event will be recorded, and it's already currently being recorded. Thank you, Maya. She has just dropped the Library Makers website in the group chat if you're interested in accessing it. Before we get started, I wanted to launch a quick poll so we can get to know our audience a little bit better. I'm going to do so now. If everyone could take a moment to fill this out, that would be really helpful. Information like this is so helpful to us. Thank you. We encourage all of you to go back and fill out your profile on Library Makers if you haven't already as well, so that others can know a little bit more about you and you can easily connect with our people around you or similar interests and things like that. Oh, we have some people from outside the USA. That's exciting. Mostly public libraries, it looks like. Mostly urban and suburban. Awesome. I'm going to end this poll. Thank you so much. You guys can take a little bit of look about where we are. Most of us are from the Midwest, a couple people from the West and outside. Academic and public libraries are the biggest ones, and mostly in suburban areas. All right. Thank you so much. So now I'd like to introduce, we have Kara Kaus, who is the Innovation and Makerspace Manager at Greene County Public Library. And we have Sarah Nagel, who is the Creation and Innovation Service Librarian at Miami University Libraries. They're here today to lead us in a discussion about equity in library makerspaces. Thank you so much, Kara and Sarah. The floor is yours.
Hey everyone. Excited to see all of your smiling faces today. Thanks for coming. This is I don't know, the second or third time we've done a discussion on equity in library makerspaces, but Kara and I have held a lot of discussions on various topics about library makerspaces. In 2019, Kara and I started the Nation of Makers Library Makers Space Working Group. That took me a second to remember exactly what it was called, what it is called. So Nation of Makers is a national nonprofit that helps makerspaces of all kinds. It's kind of in a lull right now due to some leadership issues, but Kara and I never went into a lull with our Makerspace working group. We have continued on with that community with no stops whatsoever. And mostly what we do is discussions like this. We love connecting library makerspace folks all over the country for, yeah, all sorts of types of discussions. So when library makers approached us and asked if we'd like to hold a discussion on equity, we were like, absolutely, because the issue of equity is something that we both think about a lot with our maker spaces. So my makerspace is an academic library makerspace. We opened in 2019 and we are going strong. And one of the really the main mission of my makerspace is to be welcoming, inclusive and belonging And one of the ways that we do that is through um, a very by trying to be a very non-intimidating space. We're open to students of all majors. I work with faculty of all majors, so it's not just a STEAM-based makerspace. I work with faculty from the humanities, education, social sciences, any discipline you could think of, I've probably worked with them. And we like to emphasize that no previous experience is required, and we try to choose equipment that is very beginner friendly. So we try to get rid of that kind of intimidation factor. But there are lots of other things we do as well. But we want to hear from you. Kara, would you like to do any little intro for yourself? Oh, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
I can
So
hear
I'm
you.
having awful network problems. I'm in a public makerspace and we are under construction, and my network feed is really, really not great. So unmuting and muting makes the whole thing freeze for a second. So sorry about that delay. I I built and now run the public makerspace at the Greene County Public Library in Ohio. We opened in 2017, and for the last almost 2 years now, we've been undergoing construction to redo the entire library. And part of that was enlarging the makerspace and moving it from a second floor down to the first floor where we're more visible. So right now, we're really happy with the space, and we'll be even happier when construction on the rest of the building concludes here in a few months, so that hopefully things like this networking issue is no longer an issue. We have a very um, successful makerspace. We opened in 2017. By 2018, we were already pretty much outgrowing our space. So within, the next year after that, we opened a second room. Um, then within another, 2 years, we were outgrowing that space. So now we are in a new space that is much larger. We've pretty much doubled our square footage and have much more dedicated areas instead of retrofitting things. So it's been very nice having that. We really try very hard, even with the construction, to have the fewest barriers of entry possible to let people come in and use the space. So I work public library in Ohio. Everything is free to use. We charge costs for materials, so we try to keep everything very low cost. We also work very hard to try to be open. So right now, for example, the library is closed because of the construction. They're doing curbside only. We're still staying open by appointment only and kind of bringing people in through a back door so that we can maintain access to the makerspace since our flooring is already done. So we really try hard to make sure that we maintain access as much as possible to as many people as possible. Um, we don't have age limits. We try to make sure we're choosing, equipment that's fairly easy to use and as safe as possible. And we are always staffed to make sure that we're keeping an eye to make sure things that are safe, but also to help people get started with all of the equipment that we have. And we have a large variety of equipment here. We have everything from AV, photography, sound recording to CNC machines, lasers, printing, fabric, areas. We have sublimation and embroidery. So we really just have a little bit of everything, really. Um, and that's, part of the accessibility is I want to offer a little bit of everything so that people can kind of get a taste for the different kinds of making as they try to decide, maybe what direction they want to take their making journey. So I think it would be fun to start off by sharing what are some of your biggest successes for equity in your maker spaces. And feel free to unmute and join the conversation and share what is the success that you have had.
I'll share a little bit. I'm actually quite excited about this. We have a monthly early entry program for teens and youth with disabilities to come into the teen services and youth services room for access to the library. It's before the library opens, so it's a very small group that has to register beforehand. There's also therapy dogs, and we have a sensory room and things like that as well. But we just opened up the Makerspace to join that early entry as well. So we have a little bit more one-on-one hands-on help to introduce some of the like easier machines like the button maker or maybe the Cricut or something like that to introduce the maker spaces to teens and families that are maybe interested in this but not sure it's a resource that's available to them. And this is the third month we've done it so far, which is really cool. And we've seen that these teens and families are able to come back and use the makerspace as intended as a drop-in self-learning space after they come to the early entry program, which is really cool.
That's so amazing. That's awesome. Go ahead, anybody else?
I'm just going to kind of echo what Marnie said, that I think just having the technology available has just opened up new worlds for our students. So I work at a community college, and we just have differing levels. Like we have students who are in remedial classes to students who are going to go and be engineers, doctors, things like that. So just having the 3D printer available and have it free for the students to use has just been amazing. I've had students who said, I didn't know I could do anything like that. Just taking a simple class for me on how to use it, and then I share that more resources and just work with them. I've just had a lot of success with that. Does anyone else have 3D printers and have kind of noticed that that was kind of a gateway for any of their students or faculty or patrons?
The gateway drug of Makerspaces. Jill, I
Yeah.
saw you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, hi everyone. I someone who works with a national network of maker spaces across different kinds of organizations, universities and libraries and museums and community-based organizations. And so I really appreciate being here. I just wanted to add to the great things that have already been said to share that sometimes it really isn't always about the programming or the materials, but really just stepping back and looking at how people work together, how they support each other, how they talk to one another, how they are able to create community in ways that really demonstrate care and sharing of expertise. And so I think one of the successes is just to step back and see the affect of people as they engage. Sometimes it is with the technology and it is a person technology engagement, but oftentimes it's seeing how people engage with each other and what this kind of space makes possible as we watch people engage with each other.
I think that's so true. I think peer-to-peer learning can be really, really beneficial. In my space, I'm lucky to have student workers because I'm at a university makerspace. So I have about 14 student workers, and they're really like the heart and soul of the space. And one of the things that makes students less intimidated when they come into the space is that they're greeted by other students. And so it's not like a scary old person, me being the old person, I'm not being ageist. I mean, like I'm the old person. But they're instead greeted by students of their own age. And then also in addition to that, when we hire our student workers, we try to be very intentional with diverse hiring practices. So we do targeted outreach to like groups on campus to try to have a really diverse swath of student workers so that students see themselves represented in the space as well. And so I think that peer-to-peer learning is very important and really helps students not feel as intimidated when they come into the space. We also have an answer from Christina in the chat. Christina says, we average 38 reservations a day across 14 machines. We are very booked up, and when I arrived, they were allowing a lot of power users to take over, and so new users didn't know they could come in and use the space too. We are not seeing a lot more new users of all, we are now, I think that's now, seeing a lot more new users of all ages, and our overall user numbers are higher. For us, the rules for use are really important, so as many people can use the machines, not just the small businesses and artists/hobbyists. So
I
make
would
sure that,
definitely,
yeah.
yeah, I would definitely agree with that. We saw that when we first opened. I wanted the fewest barriers of entry possible, because I really just wanted to encourage the community to come in and see the space. So I didn't want to make it difficult. But then we found that issues because we didn't have a lot of rules, that people really were coming in and kind of taking over a machine for most of the day, and then other people weren't getting a chance to use that. So then we implemented kind of a soft time limit policy where people could come in. It was still first come, first serve, but there were now time limits on how long you could use a machine before somebody else had the right to kind of bump you off of it. And the staff would enforce that kind of bumping after so long, to the point where we got so busy that even that wasn't really enough. And we went to an appointment module, which I was really hesitant to do because going to, you have to book the appointment. You can still walk in, and if it's available, you can get on it. But to put up appointments to me seemed like a barrier. But we were to the point where we were so busy and backed up with use that people weren't coming in because they couldn't get on machines. So switching to appointments has really opened up that accessible access to other machines, because people now feel like they can make that reservation and know that they can come in and get on that machine. So we're seeing people come back that had kind of not been coming in, and having those time limits for every machine that's kind of pretty well kept now, since we've got appointments and somebody else is coming in, you have to get off. I think has really made it easier for people to access the machine, even though I was super concerned in the beginning because it seems like it would be the opposite. But we've gotten so much positive feedback from patrons, knowing, when they can use the machine, that it is theirs to use and that it is equitable, that everybody has the same rules that they follow. And then we found that even though we were enforcing these rules the same, that writing it up into a policy really became something that we did in this last year, just so that we had a policy to point to when people are asking questions about how are you doing these appointments? What are the rules? And we could tell them, but having it in writing, I think, has really made a difference too. And I don't usually like putting things in policy, because here we have to like put that through a board process. It has to be approved, and it's a whole kind of a big thing. Oh, I like doing things very more procedure. But sometimes I think having the policies really does help protect the equity and access.
That's really interesting because I'm sort of at the point where I'm like, do I move to a reservation only system? Because we're a drop-in first come, first serve system as well. And on our busiest day, which
Yeah.
we're only open from 12 to 6 on Sundays, we could see upwards to 100 people in that 6
Mhm.
hours. And so I'm wondering if maybe like an appointment-based system would be better, in the sense of you have to get off at this time because someone's made a reservation, but we like have reservations for our study rooms and our studio suites and things like that. So we have already sort of an idea of reservation based systems, but I was so worried that like the drop-in model of our service, people would be coming less, but when they do come in, there is a wait list, they're already annoyed anyways.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting that it is also drop-in, but also reservation based on
Yes.
availability.
So if somebody drops in and the machine doesn't have a reservation on it, they're welcome to use that machine. So there is still that opportunity, but what we're finding is a lot of the popular machines generally do have those appointments booked, because people want to be able to come in and use it when they want to use it. And we were having the same issue that our door counts are usually between 2,500 and 4,000 a month. So we're seeing lots of people, and people were getting very frustrated that they were coming in to use a machine and they would sit for hours to wait for their turn on the machine. And so, or there's a wait list and they can't get on today, and they've come all this way to our space and now they have to leave and come back another time. So, switching it to a reservation based, that it's drop in if available, but we say reservations are preferred, because then that machine is yours to use when you come in. And it really has, I think, just made everybody so much happier. And the staff are happier because it's easier for us to kind of gauge, use, and we don't have a whole room full of people just angrily glaring at us while they wait for their turn on the equipment.
A good
So,
point. Was the transition hard for you to go from drop-in to reservation-based?
So I have to say we did kind of cheat a little because we made the transition over COVID. So it was one of those, as we reopened, we were switching how we operated anyway. So it was kind of a nice time to flip an entire system because we didn't have much choice. But it honestly went much better. I expected the patrons to be more upset about it, and they actually were super happy that they no longer had to sit and wait. They could come in. We were seeing people, you know, we open every day at 10, and we were seeing people racing to try to get to the door before the other people because, you know, they're waiting in lines to get in. So, you know, having the reservation system where you don't have to be the fastest from point A to point B once you get in the building to get on the machine has really, I think, made it much nicer. And the patrons have been much, like, I really did expect pushback, but I only got positive responses from the community. So it to me, I think I had a lot of concerns about it, but it honestly went way better than I ever would have expected. And in the end, it really is just so much nicer for staff, for patrons, for just everybody involved. And it makes it easier too. Sometimes if we want to do classes and use equipment, it's nice having the reservation model because we can book off equipment to use in classes. And that messaging is a lot clearer than when we were just putting signs out and having to kick people off. So there's been a lot of upsides to switching to that model. We do have rules in place. We don't allow people to book more than like 4 weeks in advance because people do forget or find other ways to do their projects. So we've really worked out kind of our policies and procedures to try to help make sure that people are honoring those reservations and coming in for the appointments that they make. There's more in the chat.
Okay. So yeah, Christina says, our staff have been so grateful for policies and procedures that they can point to for customers, has been vital. The staff feel more empowered to actually tell people they need to get off so the next person can get on. And everyone is saying the same thing. It's not one staff saying something else, then who takes it and then who takes it over next. We have a wait list as well, but if no one is on it, or if there's a no-show or a sudden cancellation, we'll put them in as the appointment. We have similar numbers as Kara as it sounds. Oh, I didn't see that before I read the other one. And then Jennifer asks Christina, do you charge membership fees or is it a free service? For example, if your people are using your equipment for a small business, do they pay a user fee?
So for us, we're a public library, and I don't know about Christina's library, but for us, we're a public library in Ohio, and so we are free to anybody who is who lives in the state of Ohio. They can use any of the public libraries, so they can come in and use any of our equipment at no charge just by having a library card with us. And library cards in Ohio are free, again, if you live in the state, so they can come in and use the equipment for free. We do have materials that they can use. They can bring in their own materials and we can approve those to be used with the equipment. Or we do have materials that they can purchase for us, but because in Ohio we're considered a nonprofit, we can't charge more than what we procure the materials for. So literally however much I purchase things for is how much we resell them for to the public. So there are no fees, it's all free, and it's just cost for materials used.
And it sounds like the same for Christina. And I actually saw a virtual tour of Christina's library last week. So I also know that they sell at cost because they're a public library.
Yeah.
So.
And I know there's always been concern about businesses, like, you know, what if somebody's coming in and making things and then selling it? And honestly, I don't find, especially if the policies are set up in such a way to provide equitable use, what people come in and make and what they do with that. I honestly think it's awesome when people are doing it for businesses, because both it helps support them in a way they wouldn't be able to do otherwise. We've seen several people actually start businesses out of the makerspace, and that's just really, you know, awesome to watch happen. And usually when they get to be big enough, they stop using the space, they buy their own equipment, or they can afford to go to professional services to have some of the same things done. So we're mostly seeing startups very small local businesses using our space. And it's just really awesome that they have the opportunity to come in and do that. But then it also provides a lot of exposure, and publicity for us that they're telling everybody they know, yeah, we made this at the Makerspace. So I think it's really beneficial for everybody involved. So yeah, this is using the Makerspace is just a great thing for the community.
We have free materials, but there's limits on them. So it's like people can't just use them however much they want. You get like one material per person, per adult per day. So they are free, but which makes it more accessible. But basically, we're like, learn on our materials, mess up on our materials, and then bring in your own materials when you have bigger projects to do. So the machine is still free to use, and the learning materials are free to use per day. So that's sort of what we do.
We also have a space for like a take a board, leave a board, and we have a lot of different people that'll kind of pay it forward. So we actually have a lot of ways, even though we don't provide free materials, that usually, our patrons have left some way for somebody to come in and pick up some scrap that they can test on and learn on. So it's been a nice way to kind of do that too.
I like that idea. Leave a board, take a board.
Yeah, we
We're
have one of the
gonna-
drawers in one of our
yeah.
cabinets is just by our lasers. It's kind of a take a board, leave a board kind of situation. And people often, because they'll bring in a whole piece or they'll buy a piece of material and they're only doing a small area and they'll leave the rest. So we have especially like our youth will come in, our teens, and they'll go right to that drawer and they'll find something in there they can use and then create a project based on that. It's really kind of fun to watch the creativity of using the scrap to create new things.
Okay, that's cool. All right, let's ask another question. What are some indicators that your space is equitable or not equitable? It's a harder question. I don't even know if I know the answer to this question.
Could you repeat the question?
What are some indicators that your space is either equitable or not equitable?
I'll start just by saying we are a very small makerspace. I'm the only staff. So if I'm out or ill, there's no one to provide services. And the other staff try, like they'll keep it open. But if somebody runs into an issue or problem, then it's like, you'll have to wait for Maya to come back. And, if I'm at a conference, it might be next week. Or if I'm sick, it might be a couple days. So I do think that our staffing levels is a sign that we may not be as equitable as we'd like to be.
Okay.
Christina says that they like seeing huge age gaps, that they have kids all the way to 80-year-olds using their space. And they do want to find more ways to provide for those with language barriers to what their staff are able to speak. Try to find ways to provide services to those people.
That's really cool.
I've really enjoyed at my space being able to, we'll do class visits, classes can come see us. And what's always fun to me is to see different abilities of classes that we have gifted classes come in, but then we also have special needs classes come in. And I think it's really awesome to be able to provide services and show that making really is for everybody.
Nancy says, recently I had someone who uses a wheelchair call to see if the laser was accessible, which it's not for wheelchair users. It has made me think about where equipment is placed. That is true, Nancy. I recently moved one of my laser cutters to an accessible height so that, yeah, because I've had a group of students from our disability advisory board at the university come through and do a tour, and I thought more about making all of my equipment like at an accessible height, all of our tools and things like that available at an accessible height. And I had thought about it, but we were kind of loosey-goosey with a few things. So yeah.
We do
That
something
is
similar as well.
important.
We have a few of our table heights at like wheelchair accessibility heights, and then we have some that are like taller for like taller stools, and then we have some at like regular stool height. like regular chair height. So a little bit of everything, but most of our machines can get moved to the wheelchair height tables, but not all of them. So that is something that we've also been considering as well.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
also,
I'm just having a whole moment because I've worked in our new space to really try to make everything an accessible height. And I didn't even stop to consider that my lasers are on, like they're built on stands and not at a table. So I didn't even stop to think about like, hey, those are built onto stands and how can we make that more accessible? Because other stuff that's tabletop equipment, we have lowered all of our tables and workbenches down to accessible heights, but I didn't even think about lasers. So now I have to contemplate that.
Hi, my name is Misa Gonzalez. I'm a student at the University of Arizona right now, a master's degree student, but I was a principal at a middle and high school for 3 years last year. It was about 250 students, a small public nonprofit charter school. And we set up maker classrooms. So we had sewing rooms, we had one of our math rooms had 3D printers and laser cutters. And we had a D&D room that used all of those spaces also to make characters and to sew costumes. So we really, and then I had a whole digital music building that we put together. And part of the goal was accessibility for students time-wise. So they could sign up for a class. So it could be one of their middle or high school classes. We had like these intercession weeks where you could, a teacher could use that space for a whole week with another teacher and train on it with the students. And so students could get exposure just during that week and see if they even like it. And then after school, a couple of days a week, we had teachers accessible in all of those spaces to be there so students could drop in and use those spaces. And that was really important too. But part of the really big thing that we were trying to do is like the data collection, how many students had access to that space and when, and was it for duration of time? So like if you're taking that class as a freshman and you take it as a sophomore and a junior and a senior, you've had lots of exposure. But if you've only seen it one day during intercession in 3 years, then that's an issue. So then how do we make sure those students like see that space and are exposed to that space more often? So we had to do the data collection. So my question, because I actually had a question, was the data that you're collecting from like booking times for the space, do you use that data to do like community events so then you can see who's showing up and if there's families or they're pulling in new people, or do you collect any kind of demographic data? Or do you have like expert makers who come in and do presentations because of that data that you collected? Like, I'm just curious if you're using that to push equity in any way or analyze equity in any way. And this is for anybody in this space. Thank you.
Currently, I'm using my data to see, you know, like when are our busy times, when are we not busy, which machines are busy when, so that I can try to, when like I'm booking classes, to make sure I'm not booking machines during their busiest times to, you know, block access to people who would be coming in to use it. I don't really do a lot of demographic based collection with those appointments. I probably could tie back to library cards to get some of that. Most of what we look at with, I think, our demographics is more anecdotal. It's what we see in the space. So I don't really use, I probably should. I have the data. I probably could figure out how to go in and pull more demographics. I'm very bad at that. But I kind of agree with Christina too. It's what we see in this space. Are we seeing all the age groups? Which age groups are we not seeing? And we found we're seeing a lot of families coming, and we actually added a small children's kind of maker area that's in kind of a safe, tucked away corner away from machines when we open this new space. And we've seen that get a lot of use. But in general, we tend to not see as many teens. So we've been trying to figure out how to target that more with classes and activities geared more towards them. But yeah, I probably should pull more data. But we mostly use ours to see, you know, like when are the busiest times, which machines are being used when, and things like that. And somebody else. So I'm going to let you read the comments because my network doesn't like when I switch over to that window.
Sure. Christina says we keep the reservation data to drive what's used most. If we need more certain tools, for instance. It's also what I'm using to prove we need to grow or get more staff. We keep numbers on attendance for our show and tell Saturday, which is open to everyone, and claim or to everyone. And then we have classes that are aimed at different demographics, and those numbers are important too. I'll say I do an end of academic year survey, and I do ask demographic questions that are optional on that survey, such as what year are you, what's your major, your gender identity. I do ask race and ethnicity, and then are you part of the LGBTQIA community? And I just make sure to say, like, this is totally optional. It will not be shared outwardly because I'm not getting IRB approval. It's completely used for our internal, just like curiosity to see like how many people we are reaching. And we see like where we need to improve. I will say that Miami is a very non-diverse school to begin with. So it's been interesting seeing these questions or the answers to these questions. The interesting part is that we are, as of the end of last academic year, our users that responded to the survey at least were 74.5% female, which is interesting just because of what we know about makerspaces in general being like majority male. And then we do have a whole lot of students who are part of the LGBTQIA community, like almost half of our students. And I think part of it is the collaborations we have on campus with the Center for Student Diversity and Inclusion and different events that we take part in. However, as of end of last academic year, our users were like 93% white. So we have a lot of work to do there, but that's pretty par for the course when it comes to Miami in general. But still, I feel like we have made strides in terms of having a lot of women users and a lot of users that are part of the LGBTQIA community, but in terms of race and ethnicity, not very great. So that just means that we need to do more targeted outreach, more work in certain areas. So yes, I do collect that information, use it internally to figure out like what types of outreach we might need to do, but that's just part of our survey that we do at the end of each academic year to determine like a lot of things in terms of whether students are enjoying the makerspace or not, what we can do better. So it's a mix of quantitative and qualitative data on a lot of things. So it's just part of a larger survey.
This is really interesting, and it's made me think of last fall we were doing a survey to see if like we were serving community members or like outside of our community or closer to Chicago and things like that too. So we like we're doing zip code collection, and it was optional, but we also had a survey to see how people were using different spaces. But I've never tried to separate it by demographic or things like that. So that might be something that we'll do in the future to make sure that we're serving everybody and everyone feels equitable inside the space as well. So that's a really interesting point that I hadn't considered before.
I do think that it's been interesting that while, everything says, oh, maker spaces in general are skewed more towards being welcoming towards primarily men, and you don't see as many women. I think that for those of us in libraries, we kind of have an advantage with that because being a library makerspace, libraries are already kind of considered safer spaces for more people than just, your typical male user. So I think I see a lot more people coming into my space that are comfortable because it's in a library. And even if they're uncomfortable with the equipment, having that location within a library where they already feel comfortable, I think really makes a big difference. And part of what I've tried to do is make sure that we are a continuation of the library space, that we are very clearly, even though we're a makerspace, we're a library department, we could, follow through with a lot of the same policies, procedures, vision. We do a lot of work out in the library, not just in our space, to try to help draw people in and to show what we're doing. So I think a lot of that really helps library makerspaces kind of be a little more welcoming in general than maybe a standalone makerspace that comes with a lot more barriers and different viewpoints on how it might be once you walk inside. We've also found, I think, that we've done a lot of work over the last several years to put a lot of information on our webpage so that people can check out the webpage before they come in. And we found a lot more of our users are more comfortable coming in, having already visited the website, because we'll say, okay, we'll help you get started. And they'll say, oh, well, we've already looked at, the videos and information you have on the website, and we feel pretty good about it. So I think having that kind of accessibility that people can kind of check out what's going on before they come in makes it more comfortable as well. Yeah, I've seen a big difference with that too. And then we've also put, so for a lot of that information and videos on our equipment, we've put QR codes on our equipment itself so that if people come in, they may not be comfortable asking the question, but they can scan that QR code and kind of look at that video again or get some help before they talk to one of us.
Does anyone have an idea of like members of their community that they think they're not reaching and why that might be? Have you figured out the gaps?
Well, I wonder sometimes people who are already engaged in the endeavor that is making sort of know what they're gaining from it, but people who haven't yet made their way into the makerspace to try it out maybe can't yet see some of the benefits. And I think there's sort of two levels or many more levels, but I'll just talk about two things of benefits. One is sort of the skill, you're gaining skills and abilities. But the second is that social and emotional affect of joy through the engagement of doing something that you haven't tried before. And so I'm really interested in seeing a little bit more anecdotal evidence or through surveys where you could talk to people or gather some information about what skills are you gaining, what affect is this bringing into your life without calling that a benefit and really allowing people to see a little bit more personal stories of what and how their thinking or engagement had been affected by the coming in. And so I think affect is a really strong driver. And the social and emotional connection to stress relief or sense of belonging or a sense of engagement and joy, I think are just a few categories, but I'm sure there's many more as well.
Yeah. So I wonder how we can show people that haven't been in the space those benefits.
We handed out cards at one point where we were asking people to email us with photos of their finished projects because we found that we were seeing a lot of people are coming in and making pieces and parts of projects, but we don't see the whole finished piece, and we were just interested. So we put out, little cards and said, hey, send us to this email address, pictures of your finished project and what you're doing. And it was really fun because we had a lot of people that would come back with, all of these finished pictures and how they're using these things that they made. And it made a really great kind of story as to here are some really great examples. And we used that in various presentations we did out in the community. We used it as, talking points. We used it to make some banners that we hung in kind of a dreary hallway that led to our space to kind of brighten it up, but also to give us some like really great picture examples of like, look, these are all things people made in this space. I'm trying to figure out a good way to continue that in our new space. And I think part of that is we're looking at a way to kind of do it online as well so that we can keep directing people, to the webpage, look for stories, look for what other people have done, but also look for what we have and what ideas you may have to help continue your projects here. And I think it's hard to draw in the people that don't know about us and aren't interested. But I think another thing that's a great tool for makerspaces is that word of mouth. It's when you have people that are really happy to use your space, they go and tell other people. And doing some of that community outreach, going out and telling Rotary groups how they can come in and use your space, working with your local small business chambers to tell them how they can come in and use your space, that those things are great ways of pulling people in and showing them things that they may not think about, using the library for. Going out if you're academic to your clubs and groups on campus and saying, have you considered ways you can use the makerspace to serve your group?
I agree that word of mouth is the best. We'll have our students make our projects and then they'll go talk to their friends, or like you said, they'll go to another club and they'll show off what they make. And then you'll have like 3 people the next day. Like, I want to make that drawstring bag. I want to learn how to sew or 3D print or whatever project that they came up with.
Yeah, 68% on my last survey when asked, how did you hear about the Makerspace, said word of mouth. So I think that's big. Has anybody else had any success sharing
I think Misa had something
that
else she wanted to share.
thought? Oh yeah, Misa, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I was thinking like in Tucson, we have a ton of fairs, like craft fairs and stuff. And so libraries are nonprofits. So a lot of times they can set up for free. And so there's a lot of times that I see them promoting maker spaces at like fairs or outdoor events. But we have a lot in Tucson, so I don't know how it is like other places. And also staffing kind of becomes like a struggle when you're off at a fair on a Saturday and need to be staffed also at the library. And I understand that. But I was kind of thinking like ambassadors. So people who come into your space, individuals of color who you're not getting the demographics of, and you're like, hey, you've been here 4 times, or you've been here for the past 2 months or something, and you love what you're doing. We have a craft fair. I would love for you to be an ambassador for us. So some kind of an ambassador, so people can see people who look like them, talking about these really cool things. Like, that's always a thing for me. I'm a Hispanic woman and I go out and I talk to my friends and I'm like, hey, I'm doing leatherworking and I'm doing this and I'm doing this. And I'm bringing people in the space who normally wouldn't touch leatherworking because it's scary, And I'm like, look what I'm doing. They're like, oh, wow, that's cool. Are you sure we can go to that space and use it? I'm like, heck yeah, I'm always there. And then they show up when I'm there. And then all of a sudden they're showing up when I'm not there, And so it's really important to like have that person, that ambassador that brings them in, that they trust. That maybe isn't a librarian. Nothing, I love librarians, so it's not that. It's just, somebody else, somebody in the community that's just enthusiastic. And you can trust to give your message out to the world. And so that's my question, because I used to have middle schoolers go hang out in spaces. We have a huge festival of books in Tucson, and middle schoolers would come hang out at the tent sometimes and be like, come join our middle school because blah, blah, blah. And they were the best ambassadors, right? Because who talks good about their teachers? But they loved it. And so that's kind of my question is like, ambassadors, people who, volunteers who are staffed, who look different, staffing who are in wheelchairs, or volunteers who are in wheelchairs, or whatever, just to get it out. That's such an important demographic that might be missed. That was my spiel. I don't know. Thank you.
I love that idea. Thank you for that, because I think that opens up a lot of opportunities, especially when I was looking at, how do I staff? We had a whole weekend event. We just had to staff this past weekend, and it was really hard to staff that. And I think pulling in some of our, and we already have some diverse volunteers, but I didn't ever think about saying, hey, why don't you come hang out with us at this event and help promote what we're doing? And I think that's a lovely idea that I'm definitely going to use going forward.
When I was a teen, if you would have given me a pin that said like library ambassador and fed me pizza, I would have talked about it
Exactly.
all day long. Like, heck yeah, this is amazing. So yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I love that.
Oh, sorry, Sarah.
Nope,
They-
I was just saying I love that. I'm gonna steal it. Thank
We're all
you.
going to steal that now. It's lovely. Thank you.
I have some teen volunteers that help with our early entry program once a month, and I'm trying to expand that as well, to get more people to come in. We're also doing like a maker in residence program next month as well to do like more connection with the community. So like I love the idea of our community is pretty diverse. We have a lot of refugees as well that come into from Chicago that come into Skokie. So it's something that I'm like, what programs are we doing in other languages? How are we making this accessible to them? Like we have videos with captioning capabilities, we have guides with pictures and words, and how are we continuing to do that too as well? So it can be as accessible to as many people as possible. And the idea of like different volunteers for different not different in a different way as in another way, different like different types of people. So that's something that is that I'm trying to consider as much as possible right now as well. And
I
it
think
looks
another
like Maya just said we have 5 minutes left, so we have time for a couple more comments, and then we'll wrap up.
So there's one more thing to kind of remember if you are looking at setting up kind of an appointment or reservation-based model for use, is to make sure that you don't prevent people from coming in, and bringing a friend, because even though we have, you can reserve the equipment, we also don't place a limit on how many people really you can bring with you, because we'll often see people coming in, they'll have an appointment, but they're bringing two friends who just want to check out the space, and they're more comfortable coming in, as a small group and doing that. We also opened up a way that if people say, oh, I want to come in and bring my Girl Scout troop or 10 friends instead of one or two, a way to kind of submit for a group visit. And we have a mechanism in place for that so that we can make sure we've reserved enough space and staffing to help the number of people you may be bringing in. But I definitely think that's a great way to, remember that, yes, people are sometimes more comfortable if they've never been here coming in with a friend, and making sure that you are welcoming to kind of that model as well.
Just to interrupt really quickly, Maya, if you don't mind dropping the feedback for today's event, and we can wrap up just really quick with a few last minute comments since people are starting to head out. Thank you all so much for attending the event today. We would love your feedback on today's event and also what you would be interested in for the future. I'm on the events committee, so also please feel free to reach out to me on Library Makers. I'm always interested to see if you have an idea or if you have a request for some events that we have in the future. Maya has just dropped the survey into the chat, so please take a moment to finish that if you have time. Also, to get updates on future events, forum recaps, and links to recordings of events you might have missed, you can sign up for our newsletter, which Maya is going to drop in just a moment. We publish bi-monthly, so we won't be spamming your inbox. And last but not least, you can also check out event recordings by going to our YouTube channel, which will have one more link by Maya in the chat in just a moment. So just a heads up, we have another event on Tuesday, March 11th, which is going to be 12 Pacific time, 3 o'clock Eastern time. We're doing this new thing called snack breaks, which are 30-minute bite-sized ideas for programming / discussions for members of Library Makers. So next month, we're going to have Alyssa Morgan, who's the head of youth services at Morgan County Public Library in Martinsville, Indiana, and show you how to host and lead your own painting class. But I'll leave this the Zoom call up for a few more minutes. If you have any last minute comments for Kara or Sarah, please feel free to ask. If you have any questions for me or Maya about Library Makers, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us today.